So joining me now is good friend of the show and good friend of reality, Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science. And one of the things that has really been affecting not just Alberta, but because of the smoke plume, most of the western part of the country, the wildfires here in Alberta. And as I said to Michelle before we started recording, it's an evergreen accusation that the wildfires that happen every year during what's known as wildfire season are somehow induced by climate change. But historically, that just isn't the case. And that's why I wanted to have Michelle on the show. Well, for a bunch of different reasons. But Michelle has done some wonderful work this year, but every year that spring weather catastrophes happen, there's Michelle with your daily dose of reality. Michelle, thanks for coming on the show. Why don't you explain to us a little bit about wildfire season? Because it happens in May, but even sooner, right?
Well, you see, anyway, first, thanks for having me on the show. But you see, people don't realize that between snow melt and spring rain, there's a gap that varies every year in April, May. And that gap depends on how dry it is. And we've had 3 years of La Nina, so the prairies are very, very dry. We had a big gap this year with almost no rain in April. Almost no rain. So, and they used to say April showers bring May flowers. Well, they brought a big wildfire. And we also have in Western Canada about 18 million hectares of standing deadwood from the mountain pine beetle infestation. So there's a map from Natural Resources Canada showing the scope of that. And a lot of it is in Alberta, exactly where those wildfires were. That map is from 2012. So imagine those trees have been standing there dead for a decade, right? They're just tinder. So you just throw a little spark in there, and that spark can come from anything. You know, there are some accusations and charges related to arson, but, you know, a farmer out welding in, trying to fix a piece of equipment, and that spark can go haywire. Somebody inadvertently, negligently tosses a cigarette butt. Somebody with a campfire, if they're not experienced campers, negligent at that point, those sparks can fly and away we go. An ATV, spark from an ATV. So, it's not climate change. Every big fire in Alberta, going back 100 years, has been in May. These are all the biggest fires. Fort Mac, Slave Lake, the Chechanga firestorm, which was so big that the smoke pall actually was seen around the world. And that smoke pall went up so high in the atmosphere that people didn't smell the smoke. They just saw that the sun turned blue at midday. It became dark in Toronto. People were driving with their headlights on. Power consumption went up. That's how dark it was. People thought nuclear war had happened or the apocalypse had come. But that's not the case. 1919, Lac La Biche burned down completely, wiped out the logging industry. It took out so many trees. 1910, huge wildfires all along the Rocky Mountain corridor there down by Calgary, when we only had 150,000 people in Alberta. We'd only been a province for 5 years. So, this attribution of climate change, the big problem with it is that people will go and do stupid things like build a wind farm to stop wildfires, when wind farms actually raise the regional temperature and it doesn't stop a wildfire. We need people in the woods clearing out that fuel load, and we need to pay for that. We need to pay for fire breaks around some of these cities and communities, actually cutting down trees, gasp, to create a fire break in advance of these known things. Wildfires are like snowstorms. They happen every year. But we act surprised every year like, oh my God, it's a wildfire. Yes, this is Mother Nature renewing the forest. So wake up, use fire smart tips, and take care of your community and your property.
And we've seen accusations from the other side of, like the climate change fearmongers, that the wildfire season is happening earlier and earlier every single year, but that's not the case at all. It has always been May. And as you said in one of your videos, in response to the Slave Lake fire, they actually said, look, we should be generally ready for wildfire season by the end of April. We should have everybody on the ground. And they decided that based on historical data.
Right. April 15th actually was what they concluded. And Slave Lake Fire, by the way, was arson, but it was a massive destruction of that community. Until they did that study, I think that a lot of politicians and the public in general had thought, well, wildfire season starts in August, so we've got until June to be ready. And that study showed that no, it starts very early, be ready by at least April 15th. And then you're good to go because, and you can see in the fire risk maps from the Canadian Interagency Fire Service, you can see the fire risk. There's almost nothing toward the end of April, and suddenly there's a huge red patch all across the prairies. And then now if you look at it today, you'll see there's just a few blotches of red patches, a couple of blotches of yellow, and everything else is blue and green. Like it's just completely calmed down after the rain.
Oh, hey, what you just saw there is a clip from my weekly full-length show, The Gun Show. It airs on Wednesday, but this is the internet. You can watch it whenever you feel like. You just have to become a subscriber to our paywalled premium content. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com to become a member today.